Okay, so for my next video, I will be talking about my absolutely favorite books of the year. Okay, so I will probably be doing this in descending order. So, number 10 in this particular list of top 10 books that I've read in 2019 are two books combined, because I couldn't decide, and they are both beautiful. And those are Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shannon Maguire and In an Absent Dream by Shannon Maguire, which I read during the reading rush this year. Absolutely loved both of them. I think I read In an Absent Dream after the reading rush, actually. They are the continuations in Every Heart a Doorway in that series by Shannon Maguire, which is about these kids who have gone through different magical worlds and then come back and don't really know how to adjust properly, so they're being put into the school where they get to meet and share experiences. There's a really cool system for these different worlds of logic and nonsense, and they're all in different spots, and it's really, really cool. I really enjoyed reading Beneath the Sugar Sky. I'm actually getting excited about this series because it was really sugar-filled and adorable and very cute. I really liked the fact that there is a character, one of the main characters, she is fat and she's also very athletic, and seeing something like that, both these elements in one, was very refreshing and lovely. In an Absent Dream, I also really loved, and I can't actually therefore decide which one I like better. They're both some of my favourites, I think, from that series. And this one takes place in a completely opposite kind of world, which is very illogical, and there's consequences to all of your actions, while the other book was very nonsense heavy. I really liked both of them. I think if you are really interested in that series, to definitely read it. It is very lovely and refreshing, and very short, so easy to get through as well. Now, the 9th book in my top 10 books that I read in 2019 is A Princess in Theory by Elisa Cole. Now, I've read this book in October when I was on holiday. I read it in like 2 days. Absolutely fell in love with the story. I actually started reading that book last November, but I had a mass market version of that book and I didn't enjoy reading it. It goes to show that if the book's not right, you're just not, if the version of the book, sometimes it doesn't really work for me. I just found it difficult to get through that way, but as soon as I read it on Kindle, I got through it so quickly. It is a very smutty, romantic, adult fantasy. It's great. It's about a medicine major, PhD student called Naledi, who keeps getting these spam emails from the prince of an African country, who keeps telling her that she is his bride and she will have to give them her credit card information and stuff like that to contact her. And she's obviously like, no. And that's until basically he actually shows up in her life and he's like, dude. But yeah, I thought the representation in this book was fantastic. It's just, it was so good. And I've heard amazing things about how she develops representation in the other books as well. And I might actually read that in December, the second book of the series. I just thought it was brilliant. I just thought it was a brilliant adult romance, which is something that I don't usually read. So I was very pleasantly surprised. Now, number 8 in this series of books is The Lost Princess by Connie Glynn, which I just finished. Now this story this is the 3rd installment in the Undercover Princess series. It takes place in Japan, I believe. Yes, it takes place in a school in Japan. And I really loved how it developed the story. I just love all the books in the series. And just the inclusion of sort of Japanese names and culture, and I hope it's really accurate. I'm not one to talk because I don't know a lot about Japan, but it was enchanting nonetheless. Now, number 7 in the series was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which I read during Contemporary-a-thon in February. Absolutely fell in love with it. Just think about it to this day. I don't usually read hard-hitting contemporaries because I have a lot of stuff going on anyway. But this is such an important book, and I loved it, and I thought it was very well represented. I've heard sort of feedback from other booktubers that they thought that the character sounded very, very young, which I thought was actually, like, yes, she did sound about 15, but basically I think that was what made it more hard-hitting, to see someone who was just so inexperienced having to deal with so many things like that. I thought it was a very well-crafted story, and it definitely made me cry a couple of times. And I recommend that Angie Thomas's writing to everyone. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's one of the most important books. Anyway, the next book on my series was Nevernight by J. Kristoff. Now, I did not expect to love this book this much. I read it for a book group in April, and again, it is very, very dense, so it took me a long time to get through it. The magical thing about it is that I got through it. It kept me hooked the entire time. Now, I've read God's Grave by J. Kristoff, and I didn't like it as much as this first book, personally. I loved everything about this first book. So I'm slightly cautious about reading the third one. I hope it's just as good as this one. I think it was just because I really liked the School for Assassins scenario, and I really ship the first romance in this book, which is strange because it's with a straight person, probably. I don't actually know. But basically, it is heteronormative. So yes, it is a heteronormative romance, which is not something that I prefer. I prefer my queer romances, basically. But in this book, I was convinced, and I love my babies, and they're adorable, and they will probably kill you. This is a very dark book. So it is an adult fantasy. There is a lot of gore. There is a lot of swearing, which is fine. But what I really liked about this was that it never crossed the line. It never fully, like, detached me from the story. I'm not usually a fan of too much gore. And like, oh no. But this never crossed the line to the extent that I became disinterested in the story. So therefore, it's one of my new favorite fantasy books of all time. I know. As I've said, I didn't much enjoy the second one. I thought it was okay. I loved the ending, but I didn't enjoy reading it too much. I thought it took too long, and it was very action heavy. While I much preferred sort of getting to know the world in the first book, which I think is actually an opposite opinion to what I've seen most people say. So I'm not sure what I'll think of the third one. We'll see. I never actually told you what this is about, did I? So Nevernight is about Mia Corvair, who is from a family that has been tried to overthrow the Senate in this Roman-inspired fantasy series in fantasy world. And therefore her family has been imprisoned, some were executed. She was sort of almost killed but survived, and therefore she goes on sort of a quest for revenge and goes to a school for assassins. Yeah, and it's just basically, this particular book is just basically her finding her place in this world and trying to start her plans for revenge. Very, very good. Loved it. Okay. The next book in the series is The Changeling's Journey by Christine Spores, which I read in May. And this was the time when I was reading some books that I was not very interested in anymore. I was thinking of getting rid of them, but wanted to try them at least before I did, because I was moving. And I didn't want to take all the books with me, because there were a lot of them. But this book I think is the only example of a book that I wanted to get rid of, read, and fell in love with. Now, this book, I loved it. I bought it because I loved the cover. I mean, look at that. That is so pretty. And I loved the cover. I was very excited about it. But then I don't know why, I must have heard a review or something, but I started feeling like this might be just a very regular standard fantasy series, that it might not be very good, that it might be very sort of cliche, basically. I couldn't be more wrong. This book was a surprise to me, really. From the get-go, I was surprised by how much cultural detail there was in the world building of the story. I was surprised by how much complexity there was, but also how much joy. I mean, this particular story really reminds me of like The Hobbit, because the characters are just so excited to go on adventures, and I haven't read exactly an attitude like that in a very long time. I loved that there are queer characters, and one of the main points of view in this story is a queer character, which was really nice. And no one told me about that. I mean, like, okay. And then lastly, okay, so I hate fae stories. I hate stories with fae. Don't try and make me read them. I will probably not like them. This is the only story where that did not hinder my enjoyment. There are fae in this story, and they're okay. That's a big thing coming from me. I'm usually I lose interest when there's fae for some reason. I'm not sure why. It doesn't seem in character for me, but yeah. So like books like The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King and stuff like that, I'm not gonna read because I don't think I'm gonna like it. But if you do think that I'm gonna like it because it's similar to this, tell me. Now this book is about Orban, who is a changeling. Now, the stories of changelings is that she was exchanged with a different child by the Fae, and she is therefore quite sickly. A lot of the changelings do not survive to adulthood, so she sets out on an adventure to try and find out why this is happening and try and stop it from happening. The story is beautiful. I really, really love it. I don't actually remember how it ends, so I'm gonna have to reread it soon, but I will. And I hope Christine Spores writes another book, because this was fantastic. Okay, anyway, the next story that I've read and absolutely loved is The Symphony of Echoes by Jodi Taylor. Now, this is the second book in the Just Another Damn Thing After Another series, which is a adult historical fantasy book. It's slightly smutty, it's very funny, it's very historical. It's the perfect mix. Oh gosh, I love this story. I love this series so much. And I really, really loved reading this book. It took me quite a while. I took my time. And I just loved it. I work in a historical setting every day. So having a story that is exceptionally funny, it is engaging, it has interesting characters, but also has historical accuracy, is a very rare gem. And I love this story, and I recommend it to everybody. I'm going to say there are certain points where I'm slightly iffy on, I don't know, consent? I don't know. I'm very sort of sensitive to these things. So it might be completely fine for most readers, but there's a slight possible trigger warning there. I like to, I like when there's consent before everything all the time. Verbal consent. Thank you. Yeah. This book is basically, this story is about a group of historian disasters, basically, and they have a time machine, and they travel to different historical events and explore that historical event in real time. They are absolute geeks, they are hilarious, and I love them. Very much recommend this book. Now, the next book that I've read this year and fell in love with, obviously this is the theme of the video, Everything Leads to You by Nina LaCour. Now, this is a story of Emmy, who has been is renting out, in a way, an apartment from her brother for the summer. It's set in Los Angeles, and it's beautiful. Basically, she collects props for different film scenes. She's been hired by a film company, I think, production designer, and she meets this other girl called Charlotte. She basically finds the letter of an old Hollywood star in a yard sale, in a way, because he died, and that leads her to an adventure, and it's very queer and it's beautiful, and this book is beautiful and loved. It is one of my favorite queer romances of all time. It's great. It explores Los Angeles and the Hollywood era. It's very good. However, those are actually not things that I'm usually into. It takes me a while to get into those things, because Somewhere Where It's Always Sunny, that's not here. That's never here. And I'm a seasonal reader, so something that's very atmospheric and relates to the season here is usually what I go for. But this book persuaded me for it because it was perfect. I have a whole vlog of me reading this book in the Contemporary-a-thon. So if you want to see my actual chapter to chapter updates, in a way, and real reactions, go check that out. Oh, I can't recommend that one enough. Okay. The next book that I would like to talk about, A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. Whew! Now, I read this book when I was in London in November. I chose it for London because A Darker Shade of Magic series is about characters going through different Londons. There's 4 different alternate realities. There's 4 different Londons, and our main character, Cal, can travel between these Londons. He has been adopted by the royal family, but he is also a smuggler, and shenanigans ensue. Now, I have a slightly more elaborate sort of analysis of why this book is perfect in my looking back on the 5 books I had to read in 2019 video. But one more thing that I would like to add is that the pacing of this book is absolute magic. I mean, the connections between different scenes and the way everything is paced and the flow of this book is absolute gold. And I read it in 4 days when I was in London, when I was being a tourist in London. Yeah, I don't know how I did that, but look at that book. It's huge. So that absolutely made V.E. Schwab one of my new favorite authors, and this series one of my new favorite books. I've read other books by V.E. Schwab. I've read her Vicious series, and I've read A Darker Shade of Magic, the first one, but this is the book. This is the book that really did it for me. Okay. And the last book in this series that I absolutely love is Princess in Practice by Connie Glynn, which is a young adult novel about Lottie Pumpkin and Ellie Wolf. Lottie Pumpkin is a regular girl. Ellie Wolf is a princess. They both go to Rosewood, this sort of school that seems slightly magical, but isn't actually. There isn't any real magic in this. And they meet and they swap places, basically. Lottie starts pretending to be a princess, and Ellie gets to do whatever she wants. In a way, not really. but this is the perfect example of this trope done right. It's fluffy, it's unapologetically pink, and it reminds me of like Disney Channel movies, those live action ones with princesses and shenanigans. And I think everything that girls and women like is sort of frowned upon as being too feminine, when it is unapologetically feminine. And I think this is a way to this sort of reclaims that. And it definitely reminded me why I liked those things to begin with. So I recommend this story, The Undercover Princess story, so much. This is the second book in that series. If you are looking for something fluffy and lovely and sweet, that is my recommendation. That is my favorite book I've read this year, the second one here. And that is the list. I think this was quite a long video. I hope you liked it. I got slightly carried away talking about why I love all of my favorite books. But I hope you liked it, and I hope you have a lovely Christmas.